Mount Pleasant City Commission this August 10th, 2020, and we'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag of
the United States of America
and
and
to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, has the roll been taken?
It has. All are present tonight except for Commissioner Malone.
First on our agenda tonight is we have a presentation on the 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and I believe we have a video presentation.
TV, you know that the video is not running yet, right?
And if you want, I can give the comprehensive report real quick.
We'll give it another minute to see if Mac TV can get it running for us.
Nancy, if you want, I can pull up my slides and share my screen, and I can just walk you right through it too if it doesn't work with the electronic version.
Okay, let's try. Let's give them another 30 seconds, Peter, and if that doesn't, then we'll go to that. Because it looked like it was going to work and then it went away.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name's Peter Hefner, and I represent Vredeveld Hefner, the firm of certified public accountants that conducted the audit for the city of Mount Pleasant for the year ended December 31st, 2019. I want to start off with our opinion, which is on page 1, that financial statements, and I always like to point out that the financial statements are the responsibility of management. In your case, your staff is actually preparing the financial statement, which is very uncommon. It's rare that we work with a governmental entity where they have the technical expertise necessary to prepare their own financial statements following the necessary standards. So hats off to your staff. With that being said, on pages 1 and 2 is our opinion. I want to just talk about the last paragraph on page 1. And in summary, it is our opinion that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position, results of operations, cash flows where applicable of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, the aggregate remaining funds, as well as the aggregate component units in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So that's what I would refer to as a clean opinion, unmodified opinion, that the city is following the standards promulgated by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board and required to be followed by the state of Michigan. We had an opportunity to meet with your audit committee prior to the beginning the audit procedures, as well as with the same committee after the audit was prepared or completed and the financial statements were drafted. And so we walked through many of the questions with that group. And today what I want to do is just take a look at some of the slides that highlight the financial position of the city, the results of operations of the city. And as I do so, I will try to point out when we were looking at government-wide level activities, which is very consolidated, including all the governmental funds together. And when we're looking at the fund level, when we're talking about the general fund or those large funds of the city. Our first slide includes the revenues of the governmental activities, which are approximately $17.9 million. Just shows a breakout of, or a breakdown of, to what sources are these revenues being received. So property taxes is by far the largest portion at 41%. We have state shared revenues, charges for services, grants, interest, but that gives you a picture of all of your governmental funds together. So it would be the general, major, local, street, the other governmental funds, and where did those dollars come from? Our next slide shows the expenses and program revenues for the governmental activities. So again, we're looking at the consolidated governmental funds, all shown in a single column in the front of your report. And in this case, what we can see is to what extent does the blue column exceed the yellow column? The blue column represents expenses. The yellow column represents program revenues, which would include charges for services, operating and capital grants. And the differential between the blue and the yellow represents to what extent are these operations, general government, public safety, etc., being supported through unrestricted dollars, such as property taxes or interest earnings. This picture is very typical from the perspective that public safety is generally the largest consumer or expense category, and it's generally the largest user of those unrestricted dollars, property taxes and other unrestricted balances, so very typical. Our next graph represents to what extent is the bottom line of your governmental activities, so the difference between your assets and deferred outflows and liabilities and deferred inflows represents net assets or net position. What is that balance being made up of? And in this case, you can see to a large extent the dollars that have been received have been invested in capital assets, the top line, the blue category. So that's the extent that you are buying new fixed assets or capital assets and depreciating those assets and paying for those assets. So this is the net balance, the asset purchase less depreciation accumulated and outstanding debt on those items. So you're holding a very straight line, and as you put infrastructure in place, that line will increase. And as it's being depreciated, that will push that balance down. The next category that we have is a restricted, and that balance typically is made up of major and local street funds, the extent that you've received some dollars that need to be used for a specific purpose. So fairly minimal, kind of goes up and down with construction activities. And the last category that we show is the unrestricted balance. That represents, you can see that it declined in 15, 16, 17, 18. Those were the years where the pension standards, the new pension standards and the new standards related to other post-employment benefits or health care for retirees were implemented. And those standards required that you record a liability to the extent those plans are underfunded. So you can see that red line, approximately 2015, the pension standard was implemented, and I think it was 2018 that the other post-employment benefit standard was implemented, driving that balance down, but we're hoping for that to begin to start approaching a zero unrestricted balance. The general fund revenue slide is where we start to look at individual funds versus looking at your government-wide financial position. So the first couple slides are intended to mimic the first financial statements included within the audit. And now we are to the fund financial statements where we provide some summary data. And in this case, you can just see where are those general fund dollars coming from. So we're looking at more of a micro level. You can see overwhelmingly it's taxes, property taxes, to some extent, state shared revenue and charges for services, but the overwhelming majority of the funding for the general fund is the property tax revenue. And you can see year after year, the increase that has been experienced in the past year over the prior year. And then you can see that same kind of picture when you're looking at license and permits, very flat line. Charges for services, fairly consistent, and state shared revenue slightly increasing over time. So looking at your general fund. The general fund expenditure slide, this shows your expenditures in the general fund by function, kind of an aggregated category. So general government, you can see what's occurred over time. Public safety, you can see how that's increased over time. And then public works, fairly minimal. And transfers in, or transfers out, that you can see a large spike there, and that's typically when you're funding some outside projects, but consistent increases from the prior year. And compare that with the previous slide where the revenues increased as well. Now we need to take a look at what's the general fund bottom line. The general fund balance slide provides a red line, and it just shows to what extent or what percentage of expenditures and transfers out are present in the end of the year fund balance. And I just want to point out that your general fund is made up of multiple funds that are used for accounting purposes. At one time you had several more funds. The accounting standards said if they don't meet a specific criteria, they need to be merged with the general fund, so you did so. So when we're looking at the pure general fund, you'll see a different balance, but this is looking at the financial statement general fund, and it just shows in the current year you've improved your fund balance position. The net position of business type activity slide shows the balance of bottom line associated with your water and sewer and enterprise operations, and it just shows to what extent, again, are you investing in capital. And you can see here you're kind of holding a straight line. As you do pipe replacement or plant improvements or things of that nature, that red line goes up. And each year depreciation forces that number down. So you're always competing with the depreciation if you want that balance to increase. Also, we show a balance on the blue line of your unrestricted net position of the business type activities. And also the remaining balance is restricted. And that's generally for bond covenants, saying we have to put aside some dollars for a specific purpose, or if you receive some contributions that are restricted for specific improvements or specific action, that would also be shown as restricted net position. We've the previous slides that we've looked at are kind of a whirlwind walk through the financial statements. They're typically being presented during your open board meeting, and we go into a lot of detail when we talk with the audit committee, and Marianne, your finance director, goes into quite a bit of detail, and we question numbers and things of that nature. This presentation really in the age of COVID is really just kind of intended to walk you through some of the information presented in the audit report. Your audit is exhaustive as far as information being presented. In the front, nice summary. In the middle, great detail. At the very end, 10 years of trend information. So there's a ton of information included in the financial statements. These slides we've presented in the past and just kind of show a historical perspective. I do want to say that the audit process went very smoothly. The audit committee goes into those types of questions. From our perspective, it's a clean or a true audit. We're auditing and not preparing your statements or fixing your financial statements. If we find an adjustment, it's generally pretty insignificant. I do want to point out that we do appreciate the opportunity to work for the city. I have included my contact information on this slide. Again, my name's Peter Hefner. You can feel free to give me a call, and or Doug Vredeveld as well, and ask any questions you have about the details. But hopefully this provides a bit of a summary for you and a bit of conclusion to your 2019 audited financial statements. And again, questions, feel free to contact myself, Peter Hefner. Thank you.
And Mayor, I would indicate that Peter is on the phone call with us tonight. So if you or any commissioners have any questions.
Hopefully this provides a bit of a summary for you, a bit of conclusion to your 2019 audited financial statements. And again, questions.
Some of the public is
No.
not. Okay. Sounds like we're on the right track. I just want to thank Peter for the presentation, and me and Commissioner Toles got to work with you on the auditing committee, and I always appreciate the professionalism and the smoothness which with that community committee operates, and also just the work of Mary Ann Cornexel and all the other staff that put a lot of time and effort into preparing us for that audit and the financial statements. And it sounds like staff is doing a great job, and we're on solid footing financially at the moment. So is there any other questions or comments from the commission? I don't see any hands up. So Peter, thank you for being with us, and thank you again for all the work you've done.
Yep, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it. Any questions going forward, feel free to contact me. Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda? I know Manager Ridley had a couple.
Yes, Mayor, we received some additional information today from Republic Services regarding the trash carts and the pricing. And we feel it important that we take a little bit more time to look at that data before we actually have you consider items number 12 and 13 on the agenda tonight. So we would like to suggest that those items be removed from tonight's agenda, and we'll bring them back in 2 weeks. And if the commission is comfortable with that, if you have unanimous consent for it, no action is needed. But if someone is concerned about taking it off the agenda, you would need a motion and a second to have that removed from the agenda tonight. So we apologize for that, but we think we will have better information in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. Is there any objections to taking that off the agenda tonight?
Not from me.
Thank you, Mary. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding and no hands up. So we will go ahead and take those number 12 and 13 off the agenda tonight. And then I would just ask the floor again for any additions or deletions to the agenda. Seeing none, I think we will open up our first public input on agenda items. This is time for the public to comment on anything we're talking about tonight. And we do have, actually, we do not have any public hearings tonight. So just state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes to address the commission. And if we have some members of the public, if they're not familiar with Zoom, there is a raise hand function, or if you can turn on the video part and just kind of wave your hand, and I can recognize you for public comment. So I'll open that right now. So I'm not seeing any hands up or any indication that members of the public wish to speak. Manager Ridley, were there any emailed comments on agenda items tonight?
No, there were not, Mayor. We checked both the city manager email today, and I just checked the comment email, and nothing has been sent in on agenda items.
Okay, thank you very much. I will close the public input on agenda items tonight, and we will move to receipt of petitions and communications. And Manager Ridley?
The items we have for you under this section tonight, Commissioners, are the report on pending items, along with the monthly report provided on citizen complaints. We have the May minutes of the Tax Increment Finance Authority, the June minutes of the Parks and Recreation Commission, and the July notes of the Traffic Control Committee meeting. You also have the official receipt of the entire 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which you were provided a link on the website. But certainly if you would prefer a printed copy of that, please let us know and we can have one delivered to you. And then also in the packet was the 2019 annual report, which is a summary, a high-level summary of some of the major accomplishments of the city last year. And I would like to take a moment to thank the commission for their leadership as many of those initiatives were taking place, and to the staff for getting those kinds of things done to make our community better. And then the last item on petitions and communications is a notice of a temporary traffic control order, which will be coming to you in 90 days for official action. And this traffic control order is to allow for the overnight parking in parking lot 12, which is the parking lot at the corner of Oak Street and Broadway, as well as the City Hall parking lot behind the Borden building. And those are the only petitions and communications we have this evening.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Those are items with an asterisk next to them. Are there any items that need to be removed from the consent calendar tonight? Seeing no hands up, Manager Ridley, would you like to guide us through the consent calendar?
Yes, we just have 4 items remaining on the consent calendar tonight. The first is the approval of the minutes of your regular meeting of July 27th. And as indicated, I'm sorry, I should note that in the section about the approval of the real estate purchase agreement, Commissioner Gillis was inadvertently listed twice in the voting on that. And the official minutes will be corrected in our books to remove her name from the listing of the yes votes on that. So she will be reflected as voting no on that item, which I think is the appropriate vote. The second item for the consent calendar is we have one sole source bid for you. And this purchase is for the replacement of all of our fire department self-contained breathing apparatus equipment, which is obviously the equipment that is used by the firefighters to provide clean air for them in an emergency. The department staff tested and thoroughly researched equipment from 4 different manufacturers and determined that the Drager brand best met their functionality and the needs of the department. And there's only one supplier in Michigan for this manufacturer. So we're recommending the purchase from Dingy's Fire Company. And we have tribal 2% funds that were received for this replacement and are adequate to cover all but about $2,100 of the cost. So we're recommending award of the purchase to Dingy's for $244,447. The third item for the consent calendar is, as you'll recall, last year, the City Commission approved the creation of a study committee to look into the potential of a recreation authority for a potential aquatic center for the area based on the research that was provided by the Swim Friends of Mid-Michigan. That study committee has been meeting monthly from November through July and is finalizing the report to the 3 elected bodies. So that group has recommended a joint virtual meeting of all 3 elected boards, being the City Commission, Union Township Board of Trustees, and Mount Pleasant Public Schools Board to present the results of our work. And based on a poll availability, we're suggesting that the special meeting occur on September 7th at 7 p.m. and that will be done virtually. And lastly, we're recommending approval of payrolls and warrants.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. Commissioner Alsager? Barry, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Just a point of clarification, Manager Ridley for item 14 said September 7th, but on the agenda it says 17th. So I'm just confirming.
You are correct. I apologize for that. It is September 17th at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Commissioner Gillis?
Motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Thank you. Commissioner Alsager?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. With no hands up, I think we can move to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Toles,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Lalone is absent. Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Elseger,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our next item on our agenda is item number 11, which is receive Center for Applied Research and Technology restrictive covenants for Smart Zone and to provide input. We do have Aaron Strang from CMURC here to answer any questions. But I guess I would ask Manager Ridley, did you have just maybe a preview or an overview of this topic?
Certainly. The restrictive covenants currently exist for the Smart Zone land, which is the approximately 300 acres at the south end of CMU's campus. And what these covenants do is they place certain restrictions on the land and the buildings built on that land, which is important since CMU typically maintains of the land. For years, we've had discussion about the possibility. I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Are you guys hearing that feedback?
Yes.
Is that better now?
Yep.
So for years, there's been some discussions about the possibility of amending those restrictive covenants to bring them more current with the times. But it became even more important after the endorsement last year of the new conceptual plan for the Smart Zone. So the CMU Board of Trustees has ultimate authority for amending the covenants, but the contract that we have between the city and CMU provides that the city will have an opportunity for input before any changes are approved on the restrictive covenants. So in your agenda packet was a draft of the amended changes, which the major issues that are being changed would remove the outdated references or the references to outdated guidelines and would instead reference the CMU master plan. It allows for residential buildings and mixed use buildings as was depicted in the conceptual plan. It allows for interconnected parking lots and clarifies the shielding for the outdoor commercial waste containers. And then it also changes the lot coverage, setbacks, building height, and parking requirements. So the staff has been working with Aaron Strang, and as indicated in our memo, most all of our suggestions have been incorporated, and there were two that we indicated which we didn't feel had been incorporated, which I think Aaron can more readily address for you this evening if you're interested in those. But we've crafted 3 different motions for your consideration tonight. One would be to support the draft as it was provided to you, but would again reiterate those last 2 items of concern. The second would be to approve or indicate support for the draft as presented. And then the third would give you an opportunity to list additional items that the commission may have of concern that they would want the Board of Trustees to take into consideration. So whatever action you take tonight will be communicated to the Board of Trustees as they review the suggested amendments.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. I guess I would, at this moment, I would either entertain a motion to move ahead on one of the options that staff has relayed towards us, or if we want to, if there are any questions for Aaron before we move into a motion, I think that's okay too. Just waiting to sort of see what Commissioner Ronan.
I'd like to hear what the 2 issues were that the city had raised that weren't particularly addressed. Just because maybe I read it too cursory, and I just like to know what they are, to be honest. The second thing, I was wondering if there's been any progress made in identifying what percentage of the land might be devoted to residential or retail use. Just in general. So.
Mayor, I think Erin could address both of those questions if the commission is willing.
Yeah. Hi, Erin.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me tonight. Nancy, wonderful job in laying out all the details. I appreciate you gave a great summary of the details. Just a couple of things to add and then to address George's or Commissioner's questions. One of the additional things that these CART covenants are doing, the previous edition when these were instituted, there were two different phases associated with the build out. And given the plan and the conceptual design behind it, this new set of CART covenants revision replaces the former two sets. So I also wanted to mention that piece. So specifically to the two items identified by the city, one is the list of uses in section B. Essentially, through my communications with CMU General Counsel and with the city team here, I don't want to speak on behalf of the CMU General Counsel, but they believed that the addition of the pieces to align with the conceptual design plan was what were the pieces that needed to be added. So even though you've got some detailed pieces in addition to some more vague comments, they felt like those pieces were covered in that section, so didn't feel like there was any need to add anything to that. And then the second comment on the standards around the landscaping pieces, the CMU has in the new CART covenants, it specifies the CMU standards. I have had good communications with CMU facilities as it relates to possibly creating a little variation from the CMU standards to really brand and roll this out as the tech park was supposed to be. So as you, for those of you that have been through the Smart Zone or around it, you'll notice the the Smart Zone signs that had been recently put up, and you'll notice that they follow along the same family as the CMU standards of the same signs or the same size and specifications, but that the coloration of the rock is a little bit different, and the removal of I'm not going to get the right color, but the yellow color that's used in CMU's branding is replaced with the white color. So when co-branding as this separate park that's a combination of the university and the city, that there's a little bit of those variances. So because we know that the land is not CMU land, but definitely connected with the university as part of the same family. So some of those guidelines we've talked through. We haven't gotten to the point where we have separated those out specifically to the Smart Zone and what those variances would be, but primarily they're following the CMU design guidelines in which CMU keeps up on and keeps up to date. As Nancy mentioned, the previous guidelines that were pointed to were from 1982 or 1984. And so obviously those were out of date and not really a way that we would want to promote development of any kind. So those were the two items and that were in a little bit of conflict and a little bit of response on why those hadn't been changed from a CMU perspective. I should also note that all property owners have received this same documentation that you all received and provided feedback to me it was on the 24th of July, in which they had no changes and they were all set and on board with the CART covenants as revised. And then based on your feedback, the next step from this would go in front of the Board of Trustees, in which to hit the September board meeting, we would need approval or feedback by August 28th to go to the Board of Trustees. So just to give you a little bit of the timeline there. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Is there any movement on or any idea about percentage of land? Thank you very much, Aaron. What a wonderful response. I appreciate it. But also the question about, is there an idea of percentage of land that might be changed to mixed use or residential as opposed to high tech or industrial?
Sure. Yeah, we haven't done a breakdown of the percentages. This is kind of the last piece, I'll say, in the puzzle as it relates to then potentially moving forward for an RFP or something associated with the conceptual design plan. So this was the last piece of cleanup that needed to be done to align everything together. And as a reminder, the agreement between the city and the university states that the city manager and the VP of Finance will review projects for approval. So even though, if these CART covenants move forward in the revision of them, there is still weigh-in from all sides and all stakeholders associated with the property.
And I apologize. Can I just do a follow-up question real quick?
Mhm.
Yeah. So if you were going to break ground for, I don't know, a residential unit or something, that would come to the city, that would come to the city and they'd be aware of it, and there'd be some discussion about.
Yeah, so ultimately the process is that if we're looking for outside developers, we're not looking to do this, the university is not looking to develop it. We're looking for external developers that are proposing different opportunities that align with the conceptual design plan and that fit within the CART covenants. And if and when projects are brought forward, that starts a process of approvals and reviews from the city and the university, as it is city land, university property. So each stakeholder kind of has a piece associated with the process for the approvals and sign-offs.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions for Aaron? Okay. Not seeing any hands up, so I guess I would entertain a motion on one of the recommended motions from staff, and then we can dive into a discussion. Commissioner Alsager? Mary, you're
I'm sorry. I do it in the wrong order. I apologize. I would move to have us work forward on motion A.
okay. And so just to reiterate for everyone, motion A is the motion that sends the two recommendations from staff to the Board of Trustees as our comment on the new CART covenants. And Commissioner Ronan.
I'd second that.
Second that. Okay. And I will open the floor for discussion. Commissioner Alsager?
As I was reading through this, it seemed like the city had put a lot of time and effort into, what they would bother to propose. And I thought these two made a lot of sense. So that's why I support this motion.
I think a little surprised we don't have any hands up, but I too will support this motion. I think the points raised by staff are important as a point of conversation for the Board of Trustees, and ultimately they really have the power to sort of do what they want. But I think as a community partner, it's important that we give some feedback, and obviously staff has spent a lot of time on this, and I think the comments are appropriate and are mindful of the things that we want to see there, especially I think the design standards are important because they convey that an importance of appearance over there and how things should be conducted, and those should probably be a little more outlined. But Commissioner Alsager?
Well, and just one other thought, on the first bullet, it mentions outdoor dining. And as we've seen from, what we've done downtown and some of those efforts to assist with physical distancing, it really is helpful if that was to happen, that they come up with some dining opportunities.
Well, with no more comments, I think we can move to a roll call vote on.
I think
motion.
Commissioner Tolis has a comment.
Pete, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it down there.
Thank you. I'm looking at this, and if I'm not mistaken here, motion A and C are both relatively the same, except C gives the city commission an input to be included in input of anything that's revised by the university. Is that correct?
No.
Oh,
Hey, sorry, Pete. I think, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think the only difference between A and C is if we wanted to add additional comment. The motion A includes the two things that staff has recommended, and motion C has those two things. And then if we had additional comment on the covenant, now would be the time to include those. It doesn't say that we would have a comment at a later time on these covenants.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yep. Commissioner Ronan? Okay. All right. I guess with no other discussion, we can move to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lalonde is absent. Commissioner Ronan,
yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Perschbacher. Oh, I didn't hear anything.
Yes.
There we go. Yep. Mayor Joseph,
Yes. Yes.
motion passes.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Item number 15 on our agenda is next up, and it is to consider the policy we talked about at our last work session on the agenda setting. And Commissioner Alsager.
I would like to make that motion, so I move to approve the policy on City Commission agenda setting policy as presented.
Okay. Commissioner Ronan?
I move to second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and we'll open up the floor for discussion. If you weren't with us at our last meeting on the work in our work session, we talked about just outlining a general policy of how things get to the agenda. And really, I think it's an overview of how things get to the agenda. It's generally, recommendations from staff, interest by commissioners, items that come up from community members, and it just outlines that process so that down the road, people have a clear idea of how things get to the agenda, and if there are items that people wish to have discussed, that they know how to get those addressed. And so that's really the goal of the policy, is to make it more clear, but it doesn't really change, I think, anything from a protocol standpoint. And so with no hands up and limited discussion, I think we can move to a roll call vote on the agenda.
Okay. The Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lone is absent. Vice Mayor Perschbacher? Didn't come through.
Try again, Amy.
Yes.
There we go.
There we go.
And Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, great. Next on our agenda is to consider a sole source contract with AKT Peerless for environmental consulting services and additional testing at the former landfill site. As many of you might remember, this is a carryover from some testing that's been going on just north of our DPW buildings. But I will let Manager Ridley sort of give more of an overview. And I think we have a representative from AKT Plus with us tonight?
Yes, we do, Mayor. I'll give a couple comments and then I'll indicate what he's available for. As previously reported to you, and as you mentioned, the Mayor, the former city landfill that was closed in the 1980s is identified as a Part 201 site under the Environmental Protection Act. And last fall, a contract was approved with AKT Peerless to do some initial environmental consulting and testing for us via some installation of some testing wells and some testing at the site because of some liquids that were seen flowing into the river near that area. And there was concern about those potential contaminants affecting the groundwater and or the river. And so based on those initial tests, which are included in the proposal that was in your packet, AKT Peerless, as well as the Michigan State Department of Environmental, Great Lakes and Energy, has approved the next phase of the testing in the wells. And funds were received from Tribal 2% Fund for this next phase of this work. And this work will further identify any potential impact on the groundwater or the river and identify our next steps. So we're recommending another sole source contract with AKT Peerless due to their familiarity with the situation and the work they've done with Eagle thus far. And the work in this phase would be at a not to exceed cost of $21,000, of which over $7,500 is just the laboratory testing fees. And we do have a representative from AKT on the call with us tonight. And obviously, Mr. Moore, our DPW director, is familiar with this. In the event you have any questions about the testing results and what has previously been done or what's outlined in this proposal. But at the end, we're recommending approval of the proposal with AKT at a not to exceed cost of $21,000.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. At this point, I would entertain a motion. We can get into discussion. Commissioner Alsager?
And this time I'm not muted. I move to approve the proposal from AKT Peerless for environmental consulting services at a not to exceed cost of $21,000 and the appropriate budget amendment for the year.
And we will need a second for that motion to be on the floor. Vice Mayor Perschbacher?
I second that. I'll second that.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second, and I will open up the floor for discussion. Commissioner Ronan?
I was actually just going to second it, so I was a little slow in my hand waving. So.
Okay.
But I do have some questions about how much of an assessment would take place. I mean, I don't know if that maybe, okay, so I'm not an environmental chemist or an environmental biologist. I mean, is there some sense of what the game plan is here or where we're going with this? Or is it just a step-by-step sequence, I guess? So if there's a consultant online, I wouldn't mind just 2 minutes. I promise I won't belabor the point, but a little education would be helpful.
Yeah.
Jason, do you want to start?
Yeah,
Do you want Mr. Robinson too?
Yeah, I think I'll leave that up to Sean to. Can I?
So can everybody hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yep.
Trying to share my screen, but needless to say, so what we found, I want to walk this back just a little bit, just for the benefit of everyone on the line. So PFAS is a term that, if you've heard it, it's an emerging chemical. It started with fire flame retardants and other things. And just in the relative recent times, we're talking about parts per trillion. Has it become one, the toxicology is caught up into the laboratory testing. And so this was a compound that was used on every pizza box, on every phone book, on anything that you wanted or needed to be water repellent and exclude oxygen from a fire. So those are the two main purposes of it. And so obviously, you know, Mount Pleasant's landfill was another case where they deemed, they being the state of Michigan, that there had been no additional contributors of, be it like your large producers or industrial processors, that it was purely a majority of residential users. Needless to say, it's still there. And so as an emerging contaminant, it's down to 12 parts per trillion. And that's like how many fairies can dance on a pin. And so we are trying to manage this in a manner that kind of supports good science development as well as policy, because you are not alone. There are a lot of folks across state that had what we older folks would know as town dumps. Sometimes they would just burn the trash. And so that's what we're, you know, kind of dealing with. So right now where we're at, if I could share my screen, you would see where we've put the wells. So right now we've really been focusing on what is the source and what is the area. And again, we've confirmed that it's consistent with being a residential and community versus an industrial deposit of waste landfill. And so this next phase is purely to go along the river at what is kind of deemed the compliance point, because what we have is we have an obligation to demonstrate that there's no threat to people nor the environment. And at this point, I think we're pretty confident that there's not an issue with people. There's no wells, you know, we look at all the risk management side of things. And so this is purely for the Chippewa River. And so we put the wells to determine if anything were leaching or migrating from the landfill, particularly those PFAS compounds. Now, I got to walk this back just a bit, because in addition to PFAS, there are metals, leads, et cetera, that are in the area, which are very common and actually the norm with a site such as this. And so our goal is to verify and evaluate if anything is migrating and leaching or weeping, seeping into the Chip River. Beyond, again, you know, going back to what was mentioned earlier, beyond those drain pit tiles that were, you know, directly conveying groundwater or water to the river itself. So with that, I'll open up any more questions. I hope I didn't get too deep in the weeds nor glaze over anything.
George, did that answer your question, Commissioner Roden?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I guess.
Commissioner Elsager?
Okay, 2 out of 3 now. When I look at the map, it looks like there are a lot of pipe plugs near the river and active testing wells away from the river. And I'm assuming that that's maybe partly for safety and partly for testing. Is that accurate?
No, honestly, is what that was for, was to evaluate the source. What is contributing to that worst case scenario? So in this instance, we worked a little bit backwards because there were those old drain tiles, and I think we're all old enough and familiar with how if you needed to get water, you moved it any way possible with tiles and so forth. So once we jumped on plugging those, but we knew that something was there that wasn't supposed to be. They being the state of Michigan, said, where is it coming from? We should evaluate the worst case, the source, if you will. That's the point source of that contaminant, so that we can kind of evaluate what its fate and distribution and transport could be in a worst case scenario.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Toles?
I got a couple comments, no questions actually.
Sure.
Feel not comfortable awarding a sole contractor to AKT Peerless, number one. Number two, I read this report over, and we're looking at semi-volatiles and volatiles. So actually we got a problem with 5 out of 20 wells, which is about 25%. We've looked at the database from the DEQ, which there's no wells within 1 mile vicinity of this dump. So why are we drilling water wells down to the aquifer to test the water when all the water is used from the city system? It doesn't make any sense. And then also I'm looking at this report on
Great question.
It says, as presented above, select monitor wells did not produce significant groundwater to allow for the analysis of all parameters. Well, it's telling you there's no water in there to move those contaminants around. So they're just staying there where they are. And what happened on this, the actual drain tiles should have been turned and run into the waste treatment plant and taken care of instead of plugging off. And then now you're trying to guess where this groundwater is coming from. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're spending all this money. There's no directive from the DEQ. We've not received any violations, and we keep spending money. I told you this when we spend the $30,000, that they're going to come back and tell you got to drill wells along the Chippewa River. And guess what? When we find something there, we'll be building a slurry wall and a filtration system that'll run into the millions. I mean, this is ridiculous. There's nobody looking out for the fiduciary duty of the city. You've got a contractor that's in the business of making money. Who's looking out for the city? Nobody. Nobody. Read this report. Well, we don't have any groundwater, but we got to find the water pathways on a subject property. No, we don't. Where's the design that we have to do that? And you look at these, the highest concentration on the one well, if you look in there with the metals, bear with me. It's on the east side of the dump, which is NW619. Now, of course, you're going to have metal concentrations in that dump. I've lived here for 60 years. They dump batteries, scrap metal, and everything because there was no requirements back then. So now how are you going to take care of all these heavy metals? You're going to dig the whole dump up and remove them? and you go to the west towards the river there, the concentration has gone down in those wells. They're not as high as the NW 619 with the heavy metals in there.
So I think Commissioner Tolis had a couple of questions that I think are useful to get maybe some clarification about. He brought up about how there's no wells for square mile, and I don't know if that was in the report. But I know this is probably impacting our city water system, but putting water into the Chippewa River, obviously, I think what goes through my mind is that leads to other waterways, and other municipalities are getting their water from these, tributaries and connections. And so obviously there is an impact on wildlife and humans at some point. And so I think if you could address that part of the question, and then also, what happens, what are the potential next steps, I think would be helpful for our discussion.
Well, I would like to add very valid points. A lot of them were, and you honestly have echoed my sentiment. So first, the metals are not drivers here. This is PFAS, and there's whether you've heard of it or not, there is a lot. It started back with the Department of Defense at Wirt Smith Air Force Base, is kind of the closest place to home that's the most impacted by this. But I will tell you, and put it in the frame of reference, the technology to reliably test for this is new. So the metals are one thing that I think we're not necessarily so concerned about. It is those PFAS. And the other thing is, that's correct. We are actively working with Central Michigan Health Department, because not only do we have to look at those that are permitted and known wells, we have to look for clandestine and unknown wells, verify that polecat is only using that for irrigation, certain things like that. So did we, kind of blanketly state that? Yes. But the other thing, so that's human side of things, but we also have to, as the mayor mentioned, verify that there's not threats to the environment, and that is aquatic and other species. And I'm going to tell you, unfortunately, Jason and John and I have talked about this a lot. This is a new emerging policy is being established regularly on how we look at these municipal dumps, particularly once you verify that there wasn't an industrial, a quote unquote General Motors Dow contributor for a community like this that put their phone books and put everything else in. Well, we're still an aggregator of that. So our goal is to really try to winnow this down and let the science dictate itself, and that is that there is not likely, in my opinion, will demonstrate that there is a non or minimal threat to Chippewa River quality. But in doing this, I want to jump into the voluntary side of things versus it being in writing. So we have violation notices, and what we've been working very closely with state regulators so that it doesn't turn into a consent order with large monetary set-asides and all the other financial burdens and assurance mechanisms, so that we're looking at things in a reasonable and palatable and controlling pace. And that's really what what our objective here is, to work within the confines. And a little bit more about myself is about 80% of my clients are municipal clients. Whether it gets me brownie points or not, I am a chip. And so needless to say, what we're trying to do is combination of everything, because we don't have a point source. This is, there's a lot of issues that are inherent with it, with policy and regulation right now, and understand in the most reasonable and financially responsible way.
Commissioner Gillis?
I'm also concerned about the contract, only a sole source contract for AKT Peerless. And I have to defer to Commissioner Tolis's experience for the past 60 years dealing with environmental controls and DEQ, and his experience as a commissioner and a community member, and also obviously his job, what he brings to the table. When I look at what he's saying of what we're seeing in some of the numbers and where the placement of the wells are, I don't see a lot of evidence of leaching towards the river. I also am concerned that some of the wells did not even prove to be able to give a sample because of the water not being there to actually derive a sample. I also have concerns or some reservations that I don't think that we should move unless we have a directive from Eagle or a reason or citation to move along. From the results of the contaminant listing, it seems that there isn't any leaching towards the west. Towards the north, there is even less contaminants. The very center of the landfill, which of course is what you would expect to have the highest levels of the PFAS and PFOs, you yourself are almost doing it on a safeguard, or from what I understood you saying, you don't expect there to be a lot of mitigation and you don't expect to see a lot of high levels, but you're almost just being a safeguard. So we're looking for something that really may not need to be looked for. From the analysis of the test results, which is the first time I've indulged, well, actually it isn't the first time I've indulged myself in those kind of results, but I don't feel comfortable. I feel comfortable enough to not do any additional testing for the fact that I was concerned the very first time when we were breaking through the clay tiles, which are 2 to 3 feet deep, and breaking that barrier. I also know that everyone within that 1 mile radius is on city water. So in one of your items of scope of work was to find out any water wells. Well, it shouldn't take too much for even a city staff member to find out if the polecat is using well water out there. I mean, that's just a quick call. We don't have to spend 20 grand to alert the polecat that a mile and a half, 2 miles down the river, if they're using well water, that may have some impact. I don't see the numbers there. I also am concerned about some of the language where in your report it said for the analysis that it was either analytical results identifying PFOs and PFAS at each well at concentration exceeded the groundwater surface water interface or drinking water criteria. I don't think anybody's drinking water from any wells near that former dump site. So and the surface water interface criteria, if you're moving out toward the center, from the center of the dump, and you're seeing less and less contaminants, that would automatically tell you there's not a lot of leaching going on, nor when you can't even get samples from certain wells. So I'm also concerned about going down this path when there really doesn't seem to be a need. We have plugged the two outlets that were found last year, and I don't know if there's enough evidence to keep going on this. I realize this is your business, so it would be very much in your own interest to continue doing testing. But at this point, I don't think there is a need for it. So that's my thoughts.
I'd just like to
I
clarify, I
would
guess.
love to address those.
Sure. Thank you.
I just want to speak to the idea that the EGLE hasn't required this yet. We have been talking to them all along, and they've agreed to allow us to go down this path. It's not that they're necessarily saying that you have to do X, Y, and Z, but they are definitely saying you have to do something. And so this was the path that we chose to alleviate their concerns. We will certainly, well, would be highly likely that we would get a consent decree that would come our way if we don't do something. So just to put that out there.
And I would love, you brought up again some very interesting points. So the first thing I want to talk about is the wells not producing significant volumes. That's a beautiful thing, because when they took this dump, this sand dump, they put clay on top of it, so it doesn't let the natural rainwater percolate through and accumulate as robustly as it would naturally. But it is, however, there is groundwater going elsewhere. And I will tell you, but for these clay tiles that were, I think, over-engineered to drain a future cell or something, we really necessarily haven't found out all the engineering that went into this landfill. What we know is it was the lowest spot along the Chippewa River, which they all are. We can go to our neighbors to the north or to the south, and Alma, same exact scenario. And second thing is the depths and the wells for the surrounding. Yes, we all know in our hearts with common sense that there are no people still living, but I will tell you this, there is a recorded well on Franklin Street I have his name and I could send it if you would like. He was not forced, he was grandfathered in to allow that well in the city of Mount Pleasant, 3 blocks away, to continue to produce. The other thing, we have a burden of proof. We have a burden of proof to show that that polecat well waters grass only and has non-potable uses exclusively. So those are some of the things that we have to overprove as part of this process that we're trying to undertake. And the most important, which we're really come a long ways, the most important of which is if we can demonstrate, refute, or confirm that this stuff is or is not getting into the Chip River. Because when we had a direct vent that has been corrected in the form of those tiles, we have to walk our way out of that with proof that is scientifically valid. And I mean, that's it, but great questions, guys.
Thank you. I wanted to go over a couple things before we keep going. So I think some of the questions presented by the commissioners, I think it's important to look at the history of how we got here. And the first thing is we did discover those leaks that were leaking water into the Chippewa River, and we plugged those up. And so the last contract that we approved with AKT Peerless was to really dig those original wells and to find if there was contaminants. And of course, they did find contaminants. And now this second part is really to see the extent of where that contamination is running. And what I think was indicated by some of the answers to our questions is that there are some positive results about the groundwater not being present in some of the places where they've chosen to look. And so that's actually looks positive, and it looks like, hey, this problem is not maybe as bad as we might fear. And so I'm not an environmental scientist like any of us here on the commission or staff, but I do think that AKT Peerless and staff have presented enough evidence and enough reason to voluntarily sort of to dig these wells and to find the extent. And I also think we have the social responsibility to do it. And if we don't, I guarantee the state or the federal government will come back and say, shame on you. We need to go ahead and do this. And I do wonder, what are the implications if we sit and do nothing? What does it look like versus, voluntarily moving forward versus, hey, the state is telling you got to do something right now, and this is how they want you to do it. And I don't know if Jason or if you could sort of describe that situation for us.
Well,
no, I'd love to field that question. Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Yep, go ahead, Sean.
Okay, so you guys are in a very select, and because this is public information, it's out there with Eagle. I'm going to share a couple of scenarios with you. First of which is Wirt Smith Air Force Base in Oscoda, Michigan. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but it's the epicenter of PFAS. They sprayed it everywhere, and the township and the county were left with no reprieve. Well, Eagle, the same team that Jason and I are working with, went there and drilled some holes at their local dump, literally dump, rat shooting, seagull, open burn dump that served a few people, and found PFAS, and they are in the same plight. There are dozens and dozens. Right now, can we hope for legislation that offers relief? Maybe. But needless to say, the big thing is to stay in command and driver's seat. And that is, we continue to try to offer that there is low risk, in that there isn't a threat to people, be it there's no wells and there's no threat via swimming or dermal contact in the river. But then even further beyond that is that there's no threat to the environment, to the flora and fauna, the fish and everything else. And that's really where we're trying to take this versus a consent order, which is, you guys ran a landfill. We're really, really sorry for you, but we need to come in and take care of this. And we'll, I'm not an attorney, so I won't even speculate of how the funds are made right. But those are some of the things that can happen if they. So our goal is to continue to demonstrate that this is a low risk and that we are environmental stewards and concerned about and proactive about this concern.
You. Commissioner Ronan?
Yeah, I apologize, and this will be the last one, but I'm still stuck with my first question. So Jason, is it likely that if we do this and we find nothing, that it's the end of it? Or, so part of it seems like a slow piecemeal process versus, I know you don't have a crystal ball. You do, it's no better than mine, but is there, is there some plan that says, geez, we put these wells here, we don't find anything, we're good to go? Or is there some...
Yeah, I think this is the next step in the process to verify to the EGLE that we've taken care of our responsibility here. When we capped those clay tiles, that was the first step. But in order to verify that that had actually done what we hoped that it has done, and that stopped the migration of those contaminants of concern toward the river, now we need to put these wells in to prove that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And so the step beyond that is that's all speculation. I mean, yeah, if we can prove that, then I think we're in good shape. If there is still migration there, then we'll have to figure it out.
I apologize. That's what I was asking. I got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would just like to throw in to Jason's comment that he is correct. I do not want to imply nor insinuate that this is a once and done. So one thing that Michigan has pleasure of is our seasons and our water elevations, etc. And those are one of the things, but I also want to reinforce that were we to find that it was venting to the river, that could that could require additional considerations. So I just want to be clear that, your point is correct. It may not be a once and done endeavor.
Commissioner Toles.
The problem here is most commissioners don't have a backbone. I do oil and gas industry for a living, and they can tell you everything they want to tell you. There's no directive right now. The DNR can't come in and just say, hey, this is done. It's just like in the oil and gas business. They come in and suspect that you had a spill. It has to be a viable spill, okay? Or they can't come there and drill any holes. They have to get a warrant. They can't do that. The first problem is, look where we're at right now. You plug 2 drain lines coming out, and you don't even know if they came from the dump to start with. You plug them off. And then the DNR says, well, now, wait a minute, City of Mount Pleasant, where was that water coming from that was coming out of those drain pipes? Prove to us where it's coming from. You should have turned those lines and ran them into the waste treatment plant, and we wouldn't be right here where we are right now. And I can tell you one thing, you're going to drill on that river, you're going to wind up getting stuff from the refinery that came down that river that's going to be in that bank. Then what do you do at that point? You got BTEX and everything else. And another thing I'd like a clarification on your report, it states in there, tests for contaminants of a concern that were not included in the previous testing of certain wells. What did you test for in the other holes? You didn't do a full array of testing? You drilled 4 other wells there last year, and I'm trying to get the results of those to look at them. It just makes no sense going any further with this until we get a directive from the DEQ. And let them tell you what they think or what they want you to do. This is ridiculous. It's a pig in a poke. We're just going to keep doing stuff.
Yeah, no, I would again love the opportunity to field those. Love the opportunity to field those if you're ready to listen. So the first thing is we pick each of those wells would only yield so much. So we wanted to paint a crystal clear. So our writing in the report you're seeing was designed to orchestrate and craft an accurate picture of this property, because all the readership in Lansing and so forth, they don't know this site from their back, they don't know anything about the site. So we're trying to craft a positioning that, okay, the cap works. This is what we have. Those are intended to define a technical understanding that there's not a lot of water. But so But I want to get into the bigger picture. I manage 80% of my project load is dealing with municipalities across the state with landfills and or airports. And I will tell you, the next thing they will do is they will write a violation letter specifically for this. And then our hands, rather than being in the driver's seat and dictating pace and understanding, all assumptions will go out.
What are they going to write you a violation for? You tell me right now. You told me you laid a plan out. You spent 30,000 and we're spending another 21,000 and we haven't got basically anywhere. You can't prove to me with this report here.
Well, we got to delineate it. Paul, you're very well educated on this stuff and I appreciate that. The other thing is, this is not oil and gas production or development. This is an emerging contaminant, and you can look. There's an acronym called MPARTS, PARTS. You Google it. We're on it in Mount Pleasant, but it will show you everywhere that this stuff is coming about. And so, no,
Well, you're trying to compare Mount Pleasant to the Air Force Base that sprayed millions of gallons of that on that airport up there. This is not the same thing.
The city, excuse me, Paul, the township of Oscoda, their dump is being enforced upon right now, in addition to, so that's extra. I mean, you would do bear well up there because they're not happy that they've been fighting this for 30 years. And yet they as a township or community gets forced upon after millions of gallons being dumped. So I appreciate being the bearer of bad news and can respect your concerns, which were very diligent.
So I've been in the business for over 50 years and I deal directly with the DEQ. So I know it. I've been there before and I've fought them myself. I've gone against 30 people there. The quality control, they had everybody. I know the rules and regulations, but this needs to stop. Really needs to stop until we get a directive from them telling you what you're in violation of and what you need to do, which we don't have. So we can just either keep spending money with your company and just keep kicking the can down the road, or we can just wait to see what they're going to do. That's my 2 cents on it. So you can do what you want. I know I'm overgunned on this, but look where we're at now. 60-some thousand and we haven't accomplished a damn thing. Yeah, it's something to laugh about. Yeah, it's something to laugh about. Wait till we get into $1 million cleanup. That's why you want to be the sole contractors on this. Because we'll be digging that dump up before you see it. You're talking, well, the heavy metals, it's the PFAB. The PFAB and ammonia that was coming out of the pipe should have been turned and run into the waste treatment plant. And now you can't even tell me where that water was coming from. Nobody knows where the water was coming from. And there's not much water there, so you can see in your samples, the stuff's not moving. It's not moving anywhere. There's no water wells around there. I can go present that to the DEQ and say, hey, we haven't got any water wells. We're not using any water sources. This water's not moving. Right in these samples show it.
Commissioner Tolis, I just want
We're on
to
the same
recognize
page. It's just proving that.
I just want to recognize Manager Ridley. She had her hand up.
Mayor, I was just going to reiterate what Jason had said earlier. It has been our experience that working cooperatively with the representatives from Eagle has served the city well, because we've been able to use their advice. And if they feel like we're trying to take care of matters, they have been willing to work with us on timelines and cost-effective ways to do that. We've also been working with water quality specialists from the tribe who have been in a number of these meetings as well and have been a part of this discussion as well, so that we've had their expertise during this process as well. So our recommendation, as you saw in the packet, is to move forward with this next level of testing to see what we learn from it. But if the city commission determines that is not the best way to go, then we can certainly notify Eagle that we are not going to move forward with any testing and then deal with what happens at that time. But as to reiterate what Jason said, our recommendation is that we do this next level of testing to try to minimize or to delineate more so what we do and don't know for that area.
Thank you, Manager Ridley. And I think, one point that's been brought up several times tonight is the nature of the contract, is that it's a sole source contract. And what that means is that we didn't put this out for bid like a lot of our contracts that we usually do. And that, I think, is because we're, staff has worked with AKT Peerless in the past. They initiated the work on this specific site, and to go out and bid this contract to other contractors and other, these types of businesses or services, they would probably have to start over. I would guess that they would, so we, at the end of the day, we'd be spending our money twice if we didn't with AKT Peerless. And I think that, the $30,000 that we spent last year and the $20,000 contract that's in front of us tonight, it's itemized in our packet, and so you can see where the money is being spent. And I think I'm very comfortable with the contract as it is written, and the reasons for it going forward. I see that I know Commissioner Gillis has had her hand up for a while, so I do want to recognize her, but I do see Manager Ridley, is your hand up again?
Yes, but Commissioner Gillis can go first.
Okay.
I'm also concerned at how you're going to differentiate. We have a Superfund site up the river from the location of the city dump. It is on Pickard, McGurk's property. That is a Superfund site, one of the largest Superfund sites in the United States. That was left alone for several decades and now has a slurry wall along that property to protect the river. But I know several floods have happened before the slurry wall, and several floods, a flood has happened since the slurry wall. And of course, that rainwater runoff and the flooding would obviously be going downriver to that riverbed and that old city dump. So some of the contaminants, being that the river is flowing downward and the Superfund site is up on Pickard behind McGurk's property, how are you going to discern which metals, which contaminants are literally from the dump and not from flooding in previous years from the Superfund site that's probably, a quarter mile up the river from the city dump?
No, that's a great question again. So first two things is things go from the point of release. So our point of release is the trash cells, the deposition areas, and we know what our contaminants concern are. We've heard that term used a couple times. We're dealing with a couple different metals, but most importantly, PFAS. We're dealing with pizza boxes and phone books. I don't want to project any trivialization of this, but those are our primary sources of this PFAS material that we are dealing with because we didn't have industrial manufacturing contributors. And so we're looking at it's greater to less than, and we're also looking at the geology. And we're also not held accountable. That is my final objective, is that we're going to get rid of all these metals for the most part that are referenced. And we're really looking at it from a one-fold standpoint, and that is PFAS. And that's the objective of this last phase of work before we would go to Eagle and have the hard conversations of, okay, there are no wells, there is no impacts to the river. A snapshot in time, that's a phrase that's been a pet peeve of mine for 25 years in this industry. Snapshot in time, they use that a lot because yes, you can be right today, wrong tomorrow with many things we do. And so that's really what we're trying to build, this amalgam of information so that we can confidently, but more importantly, in a meaningful manner, take this and present to them all the sentiment that has been, presented here tonight that I am in total agreement with. And that is that we need to look at this at face value, non-industrial, residential landfill dump. I will call it, I'm old enough to, and I think we all remember the old dumps, and that's all this was. There's 1,300 of them in the state. And we just happen to be lucky number 36, 37 because of these clay tiles. And again, no disrespect meant with the trivialization or the, kind of fast verbiage description of the plight of what we're dealing with. But those are my objectives, is to be able to confidently go in, have this same conversation with the state regulators and explain this so that we can get it down to a manageable, understood project.
And so again, I ask, how can you tell where the contaminants are coming from if you detected any, if it didn't come up upriver at the Superfund site, quarter mile away?
Concentrations increasing to decreasing. So that's why all those holes. And golly gee, I'll share again if I can, but that's why we poked all those. We were tasked with poking all those holes in the center of the site. So from that is your source. That's the point of release or the drop zone. And so from there, anything that is lower is consistent with what we'd expect if we find a spike or something new. But the other thing is we will not be looking for anything new. We're trying to define what is the contaminant's concern. And that's what it means. Could it threaten the environment? And then we're moving out from there. And it just so happens that a couple of the metals, and that's why they warranted, not in my opinion, but in regulator opinion, they had to be discussed just so we acknowledge everything that we're looking for. And one of the other, points, and it's been brought up multiple times. Why do we mention there's no water and we couldn't get these things? Because there's no water and you need a certain volume. Certain things need a volumetric amount or aliquot for that analysis, it wasn't achievable. So those are favorable things, although at face value, they may not seem that way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify one thing that you mentioned, Mayor, in regard to the sole source contract. If the commission is uncomfortable with the sole source aspect of it, it could be bid. And I just wanted to clarify, we wouldn't have to start from scratch again, because certainly the wells that have been drilled are already there, so we wouldn't have to incur that. All the test results we have from last year would be available to a new consultant. There certainly would be some probably redo costs and some education costs based on all the conversations with Eagle and so forth. But I just wanted to be clear that we wouldn't have to start from scratch again if we started with a new consultant. A lot of that data would be available to a new consultant, just to clarify.
Thank you, Mayor Ridley. Commissioner Helsager?
I have a question about what is the amount of the tribal grant?
It was 20, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jason.
That would cover the entire contract, plus a few $1,000s. I think it was 24,000 was the amount that we got from the tribe. So, yeah. And we've kept them apprised of what the plan was anyway. And so that was when we made that 2% application. It was a plan very similar to this one that's in front of you today. So that's, they're funding it, and they've been apprised of what the plan is. So.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Toles, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Wanted to make a couple of comments. Manager Ridley clarified that on the reports and everything else that we have here. We pay for this work product. We have all the wells are drilled. The wells are still there. All the database is here. Okay? So we don't have to start from scratch. That was incorrect. Also, I want to comment, Manager Ridley said, well, we'll just contact the DEQ and tell them we're not doing any more testing. You would never do that. You've already done testing. All I'm saying is you put a hold on it and you wait till you get a directive to tell you what they want you to do. And my third and last comment is there was industrial places that dumped in that dump. It's right behind my warehouse property. Faro Manufacturing, Schlumberger, Dowell, they all dump stuff there. Where do you think those heavy metals are coming from? I give up. I've said all I want, and let's move on, I guess.
Well, I think it's been a very thorough discussion, and I want to thank AKT for being with us. I don't see any more hands up for questions and comments, so I think at this point we can go into a roll call vote on approving the contract with AKT Peerless. So.
Okay. Commissioner Gillis.
No.
Commissioner Alsager.
No.
Commissioner Toles.
No.
Commissioner Ronan. I think you're muted still.
I apologize. Yes, I just finish it out.
All right. Commissioner Lalone is absent. Commissioner or Vice Mayor Perschbacher.
Yes. Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes. And Jeremy, I know you're going to announce we have a tie. We have a 3-3 vote, correct?
Which is a fail.
Which is a failed motion. So at this point, I would ask my fellow commissioners, if you want to offer a subsequent motion at this time, this would be the time to do that. Commissioner Alsager?
I move that we change the wording from a sole source contract to an open contract and rebid the project.
Commissioner Ronan?
Do we have to deal with that motion first?
Yeah, so that is on the floor. It either needs a second. If it doesn't receive a second, that motion dies, and then we move on. Another motion if that's the direction we're heading. But at this point, Commissioner Rowan, I would allow you to either stay silent or second that motion. Commissioner Gillis.
Second.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second, and that would, the effect of this motion would to keep the contract or to bid the contract out. And I would guess at this point I would ask Major Ridley, what does that look like in terms of a timeline, and does that affect other parts of this project that maybe aren't obvious?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but what it would look like is we would develop the specifications of what we're looking for in this next phase of testing based on the test results we have thus far and the wells that are in place. And we would send that out to multiple consulting firms, probably give them a couple of weeks to respond to the request for proposals. And then we would evaluate those and determine which one we think best moves us forward and bring back a new recommendation to you. So I'm not sure exactly how long that would take, but since I'm guessing a month at a minimum.
Would that impact the ability of this project to be done before the weather turns? Probably.
I don't think so, because last year we were drilling the wells in November, I believe it was. Jason, do you have a thought on that about whether that would cause problems with getting it done this year?
I don't think so. The only thing I can see there being a problem with that clay cap is very sticky. When it gets wet, I think AKT got stuck out there several times. So that would be the only caveat, is if we get a bunch of wet weather in the fall.
I guess I have one more question. Would AKT Peerless they would be included in this request for proposal, right?
Yes, we would send them the bid package as well.
Okay.
And
sorry.
Spirit of 25 years of doing this, I will actually provide you with the bid specification languages based on, correspondence and recent conversations with Eagle, so that we can make sure that it, and also having written the, grant for the tribal funding relief, it will be consistent with that, so we can make sure that irregardless, the consistency of the project goes on.
Any other discussion before we move on? Well, I think that obviously I feel pretty strongly about moving forward with this project. If it does help, our commission to bid it out, that's something I think that I'm willing to do. I also trust staff's recommendation, and it seems like they have been comfortable working with AKT Peerless, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see them again down the road. But at this point, we can move to a roll call vote on bidding this contract as an open source contract.
All right. Commissioner Ronan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tolis,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsager,
Yes.
Commissioner Gillis,
Yes.
Commissioner Lalone is absent. Vice Mayor Perschbacher,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
I'd like to thank AKT Peerless for being with us today again, and obviously the discussion here today.
Thank you.
Next, I think we have announcements on new business or city-related issues. And I just had a couple things that I wanted to say. First, obviously later this month on August 20th, we have our open house for the master plan. And I think over the next couple of weeks, all that information is available on the city's website. You can find it at, I think it's Master Plan 2050. If you just look for that on the city's website, you'll be able to find our draft plan. And I think there's abilities to offer comment. Also, this is our last meeting before CMU students are coming back. They're moving back this coming week. And I think it's going to be a real test for our community. Obviously, we're thankful for our student population and them coming back. Obviously, with the pandemic and all the health concerns that are coming along with that, I think a lot of people are nervous, and some are probably excited, and many of us, I know myself, are both. And I just want to send a message to our community and especially our students that this is going to be a test of our ability to work together, to wear masks, to stay safe, to be disciplined in our socialization, and that we don't gather in large groups, and that we look out for one another. And there are going to be some tests for people to probably be, maybe the party pooper, the naysayer. But I just want to say that I'm supportive of people who are going to be willing to do that and work for the better good for all of us. There's obviously a lot of strong emotions on either side. Everybody's seen the discussions at the school board meetings for our K through 12 students, and really the argument is the same at our higher ed, but we're dealing with adults, and as adults we expect you to make good decisions on your own behalf and on the behalf of others. And I know staff is working this week to communicate our community standards and throughout the neighborhoods north of campus. So it's up to us and it's up to you whether or not school remains the way that we'd like it to be, and take that responsibility not lightly. So that's all I really have for tonight. Obviously, fill out your census and be safe. And I will hand this over to Commissioner Gillis.
Yes, I also was going to encourage everyone to fill out the census. We have been dealt a new hand of cards where we're going to be closing the census 30 days early. So it is imperative, if you haven't, to fill out the census and to ask around to maybe your friends and family and neighbors to see that everyone is counted. It's really important, not only for funding, but federal representation. So if you need any help, please reach out to someone here at City Hall or to any one of our city commissioners, and we will help you get that done. I also want to encourage our community members to sign up for one of our boards and commission vacancies. I'm not on the appointments committee, but when I was for several years, I usually made an announcement of the vacancies. So I would like to let you know that there is a vacancy on the building authority, the building, fire, and sanitary sewer board, also the city CMU student liaison committee. We have a vacancy on the Historic District Commission, Isabella County Material Recovering Facility, Local Office Compensation Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and our Principal Shopping District Board. If you are interested in any one of these boards, you could find that application at mountpleasant.org under boards and commissions, and fill out the application and send it in. And we would love for you to join our team. So several opportunities to become involved, and I would hope that you would do so. So thank you.
Commissioner Ronan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say there are a couple of reports that city residents might want to take a look at. The comprehensive annual financial report is online. I know I fell asleep reading it, but it's wonderfully well done, and I thank the staff for doing it. But there's also the Mount Pleasant 2019 annual report, and I think you should absolutely read that. I mean, and not only didn't I fall asleep, but I was very pleased and sort of smiling when I finished reading it. It's a wonderful report of what the city did in 2019, and I don't know who puts it together, but it's wonderfully well done. And is that available online? Is that?
Yes, it is. It's on the main page of our website.
Okay, but go to the website, take a look at it. It's a wonderfully, wonderfully developed document that sort of highlights all the things that the city has done. So I'll be quiet. Thank you.
I would be amiss also. It was last week we had our August primaries, and I think we had some record-setting absentee ballot turn-ins. I think we only had over 2,100 absentee ballots turned in. And so, and Jeremy Howard, who's the city clerk, and his staff and team worked diligently probably the weeks up to and the day of the election to get that done in a timely manner. And then he got to celebrate his birthday, I believe, the next day. Probably a little sleep deprived, but I just wanted to say thank you to Jeremy and everyone else who worked with him. And the election went very well. And I know they've got probably a little more of a challenge coming up in November. Probably expecting a lot more absentee voting. And so thank you for your work. And if you have any words, please.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks for that. And yeah, it was a record turnout, and we saw 23.5% overall turnout, and the vast majority of that was the AV. So that was some records that were set for us, records were set across the state. So people certainly took advantage of that new way to do that, and a safe way to do that, but still were able to go to the polls and vote in person if they wanted to, and we were able to handle those and keep everybody socially distanced and safe when they did that.
Awesome, thank you.
And if he wants to get caught up on his sleep, he can look at that financial report. And that should help him go to sleep.
It's a happy read.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Commissioner Tolis, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Mary Ann, Kathy, and the rest of the staff that worked on the audit report. It was good reading, and they definitely saved the city a lot of money from the auditors from the work that and effort they put into it. So thank all of them.
All right, well, I don't see any more hands up for announcements or city related issues. So at this point, I'll open up our public comment section on agenda or non-agenda items. And if you're in our meeting, you can either use the hand raise function, or if you want to just turn on the video and wave at me, I can recognize you for 5 minutes and state your name and address. I'm not seeing any interest, I think, in public comment. So Nancy, did we have any emailed comments?
Actually, Mayor, we did have one that came in during the meeting. And we arrived at, I think, 7:25, it says. And it's from Mike Logan, who is with, trying to get the name of his firm, Michigan Consulting and Environmental. And his email letter from Mr. Logan says, in reference to item number 16 on the agenda, Michigan Consulting and Environmental disagrees with sole sourcing any contract and suggests a bid for environmental consulting services. MCE is a local firm operating out of the same location, 1669 South Isabella, for 30 years and provides a wide variety of client-focused environmental consulting. MCE also has 2 current contacts with closed landfills and has also provided the removal and closure of 2 underground storage tanks at the City of Mount Pleasant Department of Public Works in 2015. MCE has a representative in the Zoom meeting for any questions or can be reached at a telephone number. So we will certainly be sure that MCE is on our list. They would have been because we've used them in the past anyway, but we will definitely make sure that is the case.
Thank you, Manager. And I hate to talk out of line, but there was one more thing that I wanted to bring up tonight. And it's just an update. I know staff is working really hard to approve our recreational marijuana licenses. They have a meeting this week on Wednesday, and it looks like it's going to be an all-day meeting to go over questions that they have on some of those applications. And I think the goal is to be done by the end of the month. But I just want to thank staff for their dedicated work there. I've seen some of those applications are almost a foot thick. And so it's not an easy task. And just wanted to say thank you and make people aware that that the city is working hard to get those done. And so, but with that, I will close the public comment section. And we do have a work session tonight on the 2019 downtown study. And I think at this point we can take maybe a 5-minute recess and come back and talk about that study. So thank you, everybody. Okay, it looks like we've got everybody back. And time is 9:09. So this is a continuation, I think, of a discussion that we had earlier in the year on the 2019 downtown study. It focuses on several different items. The sort of core of that was the 10-10-10 idea. And then there's obviously staff has presented some policy options and things that we can move ahead and move ahead forward with. We have Michelle Sponseller here with us. And really, I think at this point, I would hand it over to either Michelle or Nancy. Maybe give us a little bit of an overview, and then we can start diving deep into some of the questions and some of the policy questions that are presented. And obviously, we were just looking for general direction tonight on most of these things. So.
Yeah, Mayor, I think you did a good job. I think this report was done last year based on the request of the last year's City Commission. And based on what we saw in the report from the analysis that was requested, the staff identified some potential policy strategies for moving forward. And just like when we talked about the housing report, we're just looking for your general interest in any of those strategies so that we're spending the time on the things that you are most interested in and not wasting time on things that we already know you are not interested in. So we were thinking we could start out with any general questions about the analysis and then walk through each of those policy strategies to see if there's enough general interest in those for us to spend some time on them to bring them back to you for future consideration or not.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any hands up in the air, and so I think we should probably just dive straight in, and I'm sure we might have some questions that come up as we go down. So the first question is about first floor residential housing along an alleyway. And I don't know, Michelle, if you want to sort of describe what that maybe looks like for us. And
Sure. This wouldn't pertain to all of our buildings downtown, as some don't have the depth necessary for it. And we're not looking to alter the commercial look of downtown, to be very clear. So in certain areas, however, there are buildings that could lend itself very nicely to first floor residential in downtown off of the alleyways and still retain the commercial look along the street front as well. This works for a couple different reasons. Retail, quite frankly, needs a smaller footprint for stock. 100 years ago, you would have, vast amounts of stock that would need to be held somewhere. You have just-in-time delivery now, so that's really not necessary. And again, this will also bring more people downtown, living downtown. And one of the things that I find most exciting is that these units then can be made ADA accessible, where when you're talking about our second floors, very few of them have elevators for that second floor. This would give an option for first floor residential for those who may have mobility issues.
I also note, we talk about some of our older buildings, especially in the downtown area, who, to put housing up there would need a lot of work because of issues that are sort of on a neglected second floor, where the first floor has been used as retail or more regularly maintained throughout the years. And do you see that as sort of a spin-off benefit from that?
It could certainly, for those buildings that don't have residential on the second, or in some cases third floor, those are few and far between. But when folks have looked at a couple of those vacant buildings and putting units up there, some of them struggle to make, if you will, the numbers work. So having an additional unit on that first floor can then make those work so much better. And these aren't developers in the big sense. These are friends and family and your neighbors living in this community who buy our buildings downtown. They're rarely what we would think of a big time developer. So I do think that this would be a good idea. It's used more in southern states. You find, charming little alleyways and people live off the back. It is not as widely used here in Michigan, but I think it has great potential for us.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
Sure.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Commissioner Ronan?
Are we voting on each of these, or are we just giving the nod or something?
We're not. Yeah, this is more of a you're interested. We're not voting because we're in a work session, so we can't vote.
So we can't express support. Well, I'd support the idea. I think it's a great idea, actually. So I don't know, however that gets translated. I mean,
that would be exactly what we're looking for. Commissioner Alsager.
I would have initial support for it. My only question would be about parking.
Well, with 13 municipal lots, we have ample parking. So these units wouldn't have parking in a different scenario than anyone else downtown. They would have a overnight parking pass, for example.
Okay, thank you.
I think, for the past several years, we've been trying to encourage housing in our downtown to bring more people, to help those businesses and bring a little more lived-in feel to the downtown. And I think if this gives our building owners a little more flexibility, I think it's worth looking into this. And so I'm going to voice my support for it. I'm looking around at our commission. I haven't heard from Commissioner Gillis or Commissioner Tolis or Vice Mayor Perschbacher, and just looking for some direction. Commissioner Gillis?
I think that's a really good idea. I would be in support of that. Being that we've opened up our parking lots to already people that live on the second floor, and parcel B is all the tenants from the 48 apartments are going to be in behind the Borden building or across the street. So I would be in support of that.
Commissioner Toles?
Also support that, but I've got one question, Mayor. Would fire suppression, would that be required on first floor?
My understanding is that yes, it would.
Yes, it would. Okay, thank you.
I'll double check with the building official, but I believe that it would.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That's a very good question. And Commissioner Gillis, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have something to say there?
Yeah, I'm hoping it helps some of the business owners, the parcel owners down there find a way to make it work so it's not constant turnover. I know I've had people from out of town come downtown and say, where did this shop go? And, jewelry shops and the such. And it was like, and at least they haven't totally left town. They have relocated, but hopefully that'll give them another option. Wanted to comment on something else, but I lost it. I'll come back to you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Vice Mayor Perschbacher, did you have any direction?
I think that this would be a great idea. I don't have any problem with it.
Okay. All right. Well,
I know. I got it. I know the fire suppression grant was for second floor, but that wasn't eliminating first floor's fire suppression. That was for both first floor and second floor, correct? For the fire suppression grant, that is for downtown businesses. Well, not fire suppression, it's to make the leads bigger so they can put a bigger water line in.
That program could be used on first floor, like sprinklers and fire alarm systems. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Coincidentally, we're talking about that later. All right. Well, it looks like we have some pretty clear direction on that. The next item, and maybe we should, I don't know, should we skip to the fire suppression?
That's
Since we're already sort of,
yes, Mayor. Let's skip to number 4 and talk about that one, because we do have we've granted one fire suppression grant. We have funding set aside from the TIFA board for 2 additional ones. So there are 2 currently available. And then question number 4 is, assuming that we get takers on those 2, would the city commission be interested in offering additional grants if that's what it takes to make some of these conversions in the residential areas happen?
okay.
So that would be good to jump to that.
Yeah, let's go straight there, just since we're already on the topic. I'm going to recognize Commissioner Toles. He seems anxious.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question on fire suppression, Nancy. When it first came out, I was thinking it was designated as a 4-inch lead that goes into the business. And I talked to a couple other people. Now they changed it, I believe, from a 4 to 6-inch. So other adjacent buildings next to each one could tap into that. Is that, am I understanding that correct?
I do know that it is intended that multiple buildings could utilize that same lead from the main. I don't know the size of it. I was trying to pull it up. Michelle, do you know off the top of your head?
No, I'm afraid I can't speak to the size of it, but the intent is that it would be potentially for more than one building, that they would put in a manifold. I'm sorry, I don't know all the lingo for it, but it would be a manifold that multiple building owners could attach to. So, but I can't speak to the actual size. I can look into it though, that I'm not sure.
I understand that. And I was talking to one contractor that was working from Clare that was working on Main Street. I don't know what business that gentleman had there, but they were running a main in there, and I know it wasn't 4, it was 6-inch. And that's a sizable cost. The cost, and I believe that grant was like $25,000.
It was 25,000, correct.
Yeah, but it really jumps up from a 4-inch to a 6-inch when you bring a 6-inch in. And I was just wondering what encompassed the change from the 4 to 6. I could see running it into a building, and then you could tap off to each side to get somebody else on that line, but I don't think the cost was addressed.
And we'll need to double check that, Commissioner Toles, and get back to you, because I'm not readily finding it when I pull up the policy. So we will get back to you on whether it's 4 or 6 and why that may be.
And can you please give me the cost difference too, from what it was to put a 4 to a 6-inch?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Ronan?
Sure, yes. I think continuing that, continuing number 3 is fine. I'm not sure I'm actually understanding what number 4 is, but.
Oh, 4 we're talking about the fire protection grant. We kind of skipped 3.
I think
actually, I'm sorry, Mr.
3
Mayor.
is the fire protection grant, right?
Number 3 is the fire protection grant. 4 is marketing.
Right.
He's looking at the agenda for the meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy.
I'm looking at the last page. Oh, you're at the first page? So they must have changed
looking
it.
at the
I apologize.
Yes, the mayor's off the agenda.
Got it. Okay. Yep. Absolutely. Yes, I support it. Right. The first page as opposed to the last page. Got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just had a question on the fire suppression grant. I know, and this might be this might, a couple people might be able to chime in on this. But when the fire suppression grant was first passed, I had a couple people bring concerns to me that it was a program that wasn't, that it didn't force business or building owners to fully comply with the fire code. And I don't know if that was, I sort of took that as, as a comment, I kind of took it and left it, but I wanted to make sure that I at least brought that up tonight, that, and I think it was an issue with, like firewalls in the buildings. And I'm not super familiar with the ideas here, so I'm pardon me for.
I think, Mayor, when a major renovation is done like that, there are certain parts of the fire code that are mandated to be done. And then there's others that are not mandated to because it's an existing facility. And so, again, we can get more details on what those are or aren't. But my guess would say it does not require 100% compliance, because we typically don't require 100% compliance when it's a rehab of a building. There are certain things that are required and others that are optional. So, but we can double check that.
Okay, I guess that was more of a point of clarification for myself, and I'm not an expert there, and so I appreciate that explanation. Commissioner Alsteiger?
I wanted to give my support that in general, I support this concept.
Commissioner Gillis?
Just a clarification. The monies for the fire suppression has already been allocated from the TIFA budget, correct?
$75,000 was originally allocated, and of that, 25,000 has been granted. So there's still 50,000 available.
Okay, and that only came from the TIFA fund, or what's left of the TIFA fund.
Right.
Okay. And so we're looking for 2 more applicants, pretty much, to take on either renovating upper story apart for an apartment, or if this moves in the direction that they can have a first floor residential, a first floor. And it doesn't expire at the end of this year.
No, it does not.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm okay. We've already allocated it. I did have reservations when we first set aside this money, you know that, Michelle. I'm hoping, because COVID, it's going to take a long time for all of us to recover from the economic recession that we're going to be in, if not depression. And there is no way downtown businesses are going to be ever having enough money to renovate without us somehow coming up with somewhere. Since TIFA has already allocated that, I'm okay with that. I'm hoping in the future maybe we can find grants also, because I'm hoping that, between federal government and state legislatures, they will start setting aside more money, because literally we can't keep supplying the money, and I don't think the business owners are going to have the money. So hopefully this will give them at least 2 more people to have something done with some more people living downtown. So thank you.
Mr. Tolis?
I also think it's a great idea, but I know one patron that was on the list. He was, I think, 2nd or 3rd on the list, which was Rubbles, and he remodeled the apartment upstairs, but couldn't occupy it without having it sprinkled. And his building sits on the corner where there's an alley. So what he told me was, in order to go from the required 4-inch to 6-inch, it was like $17,000 more on top of the $25,000, which put it out of the ballpark for him, to spend the extra $17,000. And actually, if you put a 6-inch there, you couldn't tap both ways because there's an alley next to him. So the person next to him could utilize it, but I think they already have an apartment upstairs that's already grandfathered in. So, I mean, it's like a catch-22. So, I mean, he wanted to go ahead and put the 4-inch at 25,000, but then something was changed, and I guess we're going to research this and see what happened on that. But I still think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree there with Commissioner Tolis. I think we should move forward with this, and obviously the questions around the 4 and 6-inch mains and what that kind of cost looks like for our building owners is obviously very important. So I think we have a good general direction. I don't know, if I heard from everyone. I know I heard from Mary and George and Lori and Pete and Amy. Okay. All right. Good. So I guess we can kind of jump back to number, and I guess I'm looking at the agenda, the first page. So if the numbers don't match, I apologize. But the one that's next on my list is the use of town center as public space instead of the current parking lot, number 3. And I don't know if Michelle or Nancy had any comments they wanted to share, or we can just jump into discussion.
I don't, Michelle, do you have any comments?
Not at this time, other than at this point, we need to start moving in one direction or the other, so I can let engineering know where to go at this point in time. So it's a little early, but we need to start having some conversations depending on which direction we're looking to go. So I'll leave it with that.
Part of the challenge with this issue, though, is it is called out in the master plan as an item, and the master plan has not been approved yet. And
Correct.
so it's kind of, in some respects, it's the cart before the horse in some respects, because the master plan has not been approved yet. But I think it's still worthwhile to get a feel for where the commission is on that potential, on that as a potential.
Right. And I also think, with the capital improvement plan, I know this is slated next year for design. And so it is obviously a topic of discussion for us throughout this year and next. But Commissioner Alsager?
Just again, a general comment. I saw a diagram of what it could look like, and it included parking around the edges and a lot of green space in the middle, still being able to host farmers market, perhaps being able to have outdoor available restrooms for visitors. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
Sorry. Commissioner Toles?
I received a email from Chris Raleigh, and I believe she's with the Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. And I received it late this weekend. I think she told me that she had talked with most of the commissioners, but she didn't talk to me or Commissioner Gillis. And I had to call her this morning and had apologized because I was out of town, and got back to her, and she was made a statement that she was looking for more green area in the town center there for civic space. It was under the feeling she was and Mr. Wallace, the chamber, that this would create more business for downtown. And I just wanted to bring that up to everybody that I received that email.
Commissioner Gillis?
I just wanted to clarify, when we're talking civic space, we're talking open space. We're not talking a civic building or something on town center. we're talking keeping it open air type?
Green space, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause I had a question on the email she sent. It said, I'm in support of this project having more park space. And I didn't understand that, what that was. And then I called her and clarified. She was talking about more civic open green space.
Yes, I'm in favor of keeping that open air space. I think it could be utilized for something much better than a total parking lot. I mean, I know we have that corner portion with the Vietnam or the Korean Memorial. I think it's Korean one there. Yes. And thanks, Michelle. But I just want to give you the feeling of what some of longtime townies community members feel. Town Center, many years ago, there was a hotel there that burned down and everything. I think it was the Bennett Hotel. Is that right? Okay. And so for those that are from that era, and for those of us that have grown up here, Town Center is something special where parades end up, certain musicians end up there. At times we've had stages set up, farmers markets there on the Saturdays. Lots of events are held there. It's a soft spot for many of us. I would hate to see a building there. I would like to see something, not necessarily a memorial, but something, a water feature. Most of the communities that have they don't have much going on, but they have a downtown fountain, right? Everybody will come down to this fountain. There might not be anything all the way around it, but if there's a fountain there with you can throw pennies in, or you can sit by and hear the waterfalls. It's something about fountains, be it Indian River, all the way down to where Jackson, Michigan. So I know the master plan had some kind of statue fountain at the corner of University and Illinois, I think by the library. And I thought to myself, why are they trying to signify that as a town center or a meeting? I understand it was coming up from the university to downtown, but they may want to put some little statue or something in the middle of that road there. But I think most people that have lived here for any time, or that even have come here as college students, have always found a way to get to town center, be it through a parade or a farmer's market or something else. So I think that's such a unique piece of property on a diagonal like that, a triangle. I think we could try to do something creative enough. Your report said sometimes you have to bring something downtown, not a specific retail or establishment. It's just a monument of some sort, or something to look at. Like Grand Haven, they have, even across the river, they have something that lights up and at nighttime plays music, brings tourists in to that area. I don't know what it'd be. It'd be a great art reach kind of contest, that people could get involved in. And I'm sure something through the community foundation may be able to sponsor it. I would have loved to have seen the concert venue that we put downtown, the amphitheater in that area, just because I'd rather have people downtown rather than the park. I have other ideas for a park, like an ice skating rink, an outdoor ice skating rink that used to be there at Island Park. But yeah, I would love it. And I really think we got to think out of the box of something that would bring people down, just that soothes them to look and, be it sparkly or something large. Indian River, they have a huge cross there. People go there up that area to see that. Not that we need a cross, but I think we need something unique that then, if you're looking for a slogan for downtown, we can incorporate that name in whatever we decide for that venue or that area to be. So just thinking outside the box a little. So thank you.
I just want to say how nice it is to see the excitement and the, just sort of, you can tell the ideas are just steaming through our heads as a group right now, and I too, along with Lori and Pete, think that it would be a nice addition to our downtown, and obviously we can supplement some of those parking issues. But yeah, it's fun to see the excitement just brooding and the ideas coming. So, but I'll hand it over to George.
I think it's all been said. I don't have much to add. I absolutely support the idea. I think it's a great idea. I think it's, I'm in favor.
It seems like we have a pretty clear direction. Did anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay, looks like we can move on. All right. Well, the next thing I have is item number 5, which is the Oprah, and I'm going to immediately hand it over to Nancy or Michelle to talk a little bit about what that means and how they could see that benefiting our downtown. So
I'll start by giving the overview of an Oprah. First of all, it generally is a 2-step process, because you first have to have a district and then you have individual applications. And so what this question is saying is, to get ahead of the game, what we could do is designate a portion or an area of the downtown as a district, and you would still retain the right to review every application that comes in. But the way an Oprah works is it freezes the value of the current taxes and for a period of years, no more than 12 years. So if someone were to improve one of the buildings and increase the value of the building, they wouldn't pay the taxes on that increased value until some future period of time. And again, you would be able to set that through the application process. So it's a way of incenting redevelopment of the buildings without having an initial tax burden from the person who's doing the improvement. Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit more about where you might see that being helpful?
Certainly. My first thought would be to use one of our existing districts rather than create yet another layer that we could choose. If we wanted to go small, we could use the boundary, for example, of the National Historic District. Or if we wanted to expand it, we could use the PSD boundary or TIFA boundary, or a combination thereof, rather than just come up with something different. We can use something that we already have existing. But I do think that this could be a good signal for folks who are looking to reinvest in our downtown, that we already have this step of the process done. And I just want to agree with the city manager, where the second part of this, when it comes to the actual applicant, would still come before the commission.
I just had a question from what Nancy and Michelle had to say. Now, if we were to, go ahead with this and someone wanted to apply for it, would they be required to do like a minimum amount of investment? Because I wouldn't want to give, free someone's taxes and then they don't really do a whole lot or enough to really change the value of the taxation of that building. And so I guess if maybe that's diving a little bit too deep, but it just occurred to me while you guys were talking.
It is possible to do that. If we created a district, we could create a policy, just like we did for the brownfield policy, to lay out the parameters ahead of time to manage those expectations. And a minimum level of investment could be one of those factors in that policy.
Okay. Commissioner Ronan?
Does there need to be a district to get an Oprah? Or you can't apply for a specific building to say, hey, under the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act, it has to be within
there does have to be a district created first. A district can be as small as one parcel, though. So
we don't need like the downtown area being, because that doesn't seem to resonate great with me, but I think
the reason we were suggesting a bigger area is, again, to streamline the process, so that step is already taken care of. So that's the only reason we would designate a bigger area than just one parcel.
so how would that streamline? I apologize, I just have some questions about it. I mean, how would that streamline the process?
Because it's a two-step process. You have to create the district, have a public hearing, have that approved. Then you have to get the application, have a public hearing, have that approved. So if we created the district proactively, those first three steps could be done.
Got it. Okay. Certainly not against it. I think 12 years, it just is a, I think 12 years is excessive. But I guess the commission could ride shotgun over that. Reinforcing people for investing in property is a good idea, right? I mean, in general, I'm a fan, but the devil's in the details, I guess. Yeah.
Commissioner Gillis?
Just clarification, we already have one building downtown, the Isabella Bank and Trust building there on the corner. Isn't that already, that's the one parcel that's already in Oprah?
I believe so. Michelle, do you know that off the top of your head? Yes.
And so it's an Oprah. Have they put in an application so it freezes?
Not yet.
Okay, because they put out the, just for commissioners' information, because I've been here a long time, not as a commissioner, when they decided to overdo the building, a historical building is underneath that layer of Darth Vader stuff that they put on that building on the corner of University and Broadway.
Oh, yes, yes.
Everybody across from Max and Emily. Okay. So Oprah District was created for that one parcel, so that Isabella Bank, if they decide to put an investment in there and put in an application, they can freeze their taxes on that building for 12 years.
Up to 12 years.
Up to 12 years. Thank you. So there is already one situation where someone covered up a beautiful historical building, needed probably some work on the outside to retain that feature, but decided to go with something else. And now the city taxpayers are, if they were ever to ask for an application and freezing of their taxes to help them facilitate taking off that facade and redoing the inside, we are somewhat are paying or subsidizing that redevelopment. That building has a lot of square footage. It's always used in some of the statistics of how much vacant or underutilized square footage we have downtown. When I consider vacant, first of all, I think it's more first floor because some of the buildings just need some work on the second and third floor. But underutilized really isn't, in my eyes, in my opinion, isn't the same as vacant. And it's sometimes brought about by their own accord of the property owner. I even like, for instance, when they allow rental licenses to lapse. If someone had an apartment building or apartment on top of their business, yet the rental license lapsed, they would then have to go by the new fire code because they let the rental license lapse. If they would have kept that intact, they would have been grandfathered in. So because of their own, under their own accord, it costs them more money now to put a resident on second floor because of all the new fire code stipulations. I look at the same thing in buildings that have been let deteriorate because the property owner didn't do the upkeep or the maintenance to maintain that. Then turn around to us and say, hey, I can't rent this. I can't do anything. It's all broken. I want you to give me a tax break for 12 years. I have a problem with that. So I do not feel comfortable broadening the Oprah district to be the TIFA guide or boundaries or the PSD boundaries. If anything, I think the process of, oh my goodness, that that property owner is going to have to wait 2 or 3 meetings while we run through an Oprah district on that parcel gives our community members a little bit more opportunity to not only learn about that and be informed, hopefully through the Morning Sun or watching these city commission meetings, but to open it up like that and then start giving up to 12-year tax abatements. I don't feel comfortable at enlarging the district. We can still do it parcel by parcel and see. I would feel more comfortable doing it parcel by parcel. Individually, we could discern if it was because the whole or the parcel owner didn't put the investment that he was supposed to, or it was to nothing to his control, and we may be willing to, with his investment, then defer his taxes for the next 12 years. So I'm really not comfortable with making an Oprah district to include all of downtown for the mere purpose of deferring to abating taxes and subsidizing development, so, or redevelopment. Thank you.
Commissioner Tolis.
I'm not really in favor of the tax freeze. I would like to see something like we had before with the store facade grants. I don't know whatever happened to that. I don't think there was a tax freeze, but I think there was a matching grant. I can't remember exactly what it was. Do you remember what that was, Michelle?
Yes, we have a 0 interest loan that's available currently. We don't have a grant.
Well, wasn't there some type of matching grant fund like when they did the front of Midori's and they did something else?
That was through MEDC. That was an MEDC facade restoration grant that went through the state. Yes, but not for us locally though. But it went through the state. Correct.
It was matching funds, correct?
It wasn't a 1-for-1. I believe it was roughly $1 to 25 cents, something along those. I'll pull the numbers.
Something like that couldn't work again, or it's not.
It could, but there are very limited uses for that particular program with the state. And with it come a lot of, well, sometimes very onerous steps that the building owner has to go through with the state.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Elsager.
I had a question. The way that statement is worded, it says to create an Oprah district to attract mixed use development. And so in my mind, does that mean within one structure or within many structures?
My first thought was both. If it was an individual building, for example, downtown typically they're already mixed use. You have commercial on the first floor, sometimes the second floor, and then you have apartments above it. So that's just the terminology I used. I wasn't trying to slip anybody up on that one. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Ronan.
Yeah, I mean, in general, Oprah grants usually enhance the value of the property. So ultimately, the city gets more tax money, more tax revenue over a period of time, right? I mean, that's the issue. The issue is that the property is undervalued. It's obsolete in some way. They're going to rehab it. You give them a tax break for a couple of years so they can recoup some of what they've invested. And then over the period of time, they pay more taxes. That's the philosophy, right? Has anybody done a survey of, I'm in favor, but has anybody asked businesses downtown if they had a district? I mean, would that have an impact on the number of applications or?
This program would be more geared for the building owner rather than the business owner. But it's certainly something that I can reach out and speak with them on. And as to how large the district is and the parameters about the minimum investment, things like this, what I could do if enough commissioners are interested in this, I could reach out and ask other communities and sort of give you a matrix of here's what other folks have done, some best practices to look at, and then take it from there if you'd like to, rather than just.
I'm only one commissioner, but I'd be very interested in that. I mean, I certainly would. I mean, I think not that I want you to spend a lot of time on it, but I mean, that's you know.
I just want to say, I know there are some concerns about when it comes to abatements, and I think I share some of that frustration. You don't want to. There are infamous examples of building owners purposely sort of not taking care of their buildings, and then applying for tax abatements or breaks in other communities and everywhere. Really, I mean, that's a real thing. But what I do see with this, and I think I like the option that if there's an application, that it'll come through us, and so we get to vet those applications, and we get to set parameters and require a significant amount of investment. And so I'm in favor of setting a district. I'm not exactly sure if I know what that district should look like yet, but I think it's at least worthwhile to look into. I think at the end of the day, if our downtown buildings are being invested in and looking better, and we don't have to put a significant, if we can make it so we're not shortchanging ourselves on the revenue side, and if we stand to benefit, I think that's worth looking into. And obviously it'll be a case by case basis at the end of the day, and so I'm comfortable moving forward with this.
Can I just add
Go
one
ahead.
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not the city losing money, right? So if I'm paying $10 in taxes and I get an Oprah, I still pay $10 in taxes. It's just 5 years later, after I've invested $250,000 in the building, I'm paying $20 in taxes. So at no point is the city losing money to buy this, right? I mean, they're just incentivizing something to grow in value that they can collect more money out. Am I misunderstanding an Oprah, or?
No, you've got it right. I think the only question that always comes up is, would the improvement have happened even without the incentive? So are you really giving up that value immediately instead of waiting for it down the road?
Well,
I think that's always the question that comes up.
yeah, so we'd want to know how long we've waited already or something. I mean, yeah.
You could make that argument. Yeah. Commissioner Gillis?
I think the name itself, Obsolete Rehabilitation Act, a lot of these buildings are not obsolete, but it is a way for the property owner to make an investment yet not pay taxes in it. I want Oprahs for neighborhoods. Just joking. But yeah, because I mean, everyone's always looking, when you're a developer or you're a property owner, you're always trying to decrease your tax liability, always. And in my experience, most of the developers will always say, I couldn't possibly do this unless I get this abatement. I couldn't possibly do this apartment complex unless I got this pilot. This is what they're trained to say. This is what they do to save money and put more money in your pocket. So I think individually, looking at things individually so that people don't take advantage of saying, well, it's in the Oprah district. I don't even have to worry about it being claimed a district because my building is in it. I just have to do this next hurdle. There might be a city commission in the future that is very willing to give anyone and everyone an Oprah for their building. Who would not, if they're going to make an investment in their building and you were in an Oprah district, who would not then apply for an Oprah tax abatement? You would be, it would be just stupid for not to, if you were going to put an investment in your building and you were already in an Oprah district, to not apply for a tax abatement. So
yeah, just to clarify, Commissioner Gillis, even if you're in the district, there's still certain criteria within the law that building itself has to meet as well. So it's not a guarantee that every building would meet that criteria.
But most of the buildings, because of the age downtown,
Possibly.
I think would meet a lot of those criteria. SBX would meet that criteria.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that was built long before or long after most of downtown businesses and buildings. So, but that's just my take. I'd feel much more comfortable. I'm very careful when I'm talking about giving up taxes. We constantly do all sorts of investments to increase taxes here. We just bought 300 or just paid $1 for 300 acres for tax or a tax investment to get parcels on the tax rolls. So thank you.
Commissioner Toles?
I think we're missing one point on this. You're getting a tax freeze, but again, you have to look on your return on investment, especially downtown. If I'm going to go, like Commissioner Ronan says, and put $250,000 in the building, and my potential rent figure is $6 to $8, when I can go out on Mission Street and I can get anywhere from 24 to Encore Boulevard and Bluegrass and get $34 a square foot. So what makes sense? Are you going to put $250,000 in something downtown where you're going to get a return on investment of $6 to $8 a square foot? Or are you going to go out there from $24 to $34 a square foot? I mean, it's a no-brainer. So whether you're getting the tax freeze for 12 years, you got to look at what your return on investment is. You know, you're only bringing that $6 or $8 in, and all of a sudden your taxes go back from $10,000 to $20,000. How are you going to cover that expense? You're not at that amount. That's my only point.
I think that's a really valid point, and obviously that's the challenge of some of our building owners. But I also fear if we don't move on something, that rent could go lower, and it makes it even more difficult. So I think it's worth trying this, even if it's imperfect. And if down the road,
like the facade again, if you did something like that on storefront facades and had some kind of grants to do that, it would basically be improving the front of the building and maybe creating more business down there. I don't know. I don't have the answer. It's not a simple answer.
No, it's certainly not. It's certainly not. Commissioner Alsager?
Well, after listening to some good arguments on both sides, I think I have the notion to support this, at least to some degree.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. So I know that I think we've heard from everybody. Amy, did you get a chance to speak?
I support this. Anytime I just believe that anytime we can increase the value of something, even if we're giving an abatement for a short period of time, it benefits the city. It really does. So I support an Oprah. I don't want the entire downtown to be an Oprah district, but I do want it to be looked at very critically and figure out where would be the best options. But I can tell you, it wouldn't matter if this might increase the probability of a business or a building owner to do some improvements where they just they weren't sure they wanted to. And anytime we can make some of their buildings downtown look better, I think that just draws in more people.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. So it looks like we have enough direction to at least move forward. And obviously that will be a discussion item down the road, as that is more defined by staff and more direction from us. The next item on our list is the is the investment criteria for the liquor license for non-restaurant uses. And I would ask, again, just from Michelle or Nancy, just a little more direction on that. And what sort of uses are you, I saw, there's a couple examples, but
So
guess I wouldn't-
redevelopment liquor licenses are special licenses that can be applied for through the state. And our current policy that's approved by the city commission says that if you want a redevelopment liquor license, if you want to be considered for one that is not a restaurant, that you would have to invest at least $500,000. And so Michelle gave a couple examples of event type areas that might benefit from having a liquor license, but sometimes the $500,000 minimum investment might be a threshold that they can't meet. So she talked about music venues, art centers, those kinds of things. Again, they would all come to you for consideration. You get final say in it. It's just, would you consider changing that threshold to maybe open the door to more of those opportunities to come to you?
Thank you, Nancy. I guess I have a question. What if we, there was talk early in the year before we had a pandemic about I forget what it's called exactly, the beer trolley idea, or if we were to have some sort of, music event in the arts pavilion in Island Park, and those people wanted to sell alcohol. Is this the sort of things that would sort of benefit from those? And I'm seeing some no.
A redevelopment liquor license has to be associated with a bricks and mortar type location.
Okay.
What you're talking about, the beer trolley is a whole different licensing thing, but something in the amphitheater, that would be more of a one-day liquor license type thing. And so those are two different ways to get liquor licenses. But the redevelopment liquor license has to be attached to a bricks and mortar location.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Gillis?
Yeah, as I understand it, it would be something like, let's say a salon wanted to do a full service with nails, your hair done, bubble bath, and they also wanted to serve you liquor or drinks. That would be an example of someone that's not or some business that's not a restaurant, but wanted to incorporate serving liquor, right?
That could be one of them. That could be an example. Mm-hmm.
And I know when the city commission, it was before my time being on the city commission, when they placed this $500,000 investment, I thought that was kind of high, because if anybody, I just thought it was out of reach for most people. And, if it facilitates, you would not hear me say this probably before pandemic COVID time. But I think hasn't it changed everyone's view on everything? Truly. So I think if it facilitates someone coming into a business to partake in whatever service or entertainment that necessarily isn't a restaurant or a bar, and it could provide more people coming in the door by being able to serve liquor, and then so be it. So that's my feelings. Thank you.
Commissioner Ronan?
I thought, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. I thought it was of an investment of this amount. So if I came in, if I bought a little building downtown or something and put a couple $100,000, put $500,000 into it, then I could get a liquor license from the state because I've spent enough on rehabbing that, on building that building. Or, so I don't think it's like just adding a liquor license for a fee. Am I missing this, or is that?
Well, again, the current policy requires a new investment in order to be eligible for it.
Right. So, and we're saying that having that $500,000 investment might be a little high. 250,000. I'm just making it up, but 250,000 might be better. But it is someone coming in to alter bricks and mortar, to build a place, to invest into the building. to be able to get that license from the state. They've spent enough. They've demonstrated enough of a commitment. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, great.
George, it's kind of like Dog Central. When they came in, there wasn't a liquor license available, but under this act, they could
They
get
could
it.
get one. Yes, yes, absolutely,
Because
absolutely.
and I don't know if they ended up investing $500,000 because they must have, because that's the way that, or did they?
No.
Or did they buy a liquor license that was available?
No, they have a redevelopment liquor license. However, they are considered a restaurant.
Oh.
So they didn't have to meet this $500,000 threshold.
Okay.
At the time, the basis of the policy through the state of Michigan is a minimum of investment of $75,000.
Okay.
That's what the state requires. This is separate from that.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you,
Just
Michelle.
a timeline. It's been an hour, so we might want to try to consider this one item and call it a night.
This is our last item anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, wasn't there, so I'll get to that in a second. I think I want to, so Mike, I guess my little just snippet of when we get to, if like, let's say we follow through and say, hey, we want you to look into this. When we do look at those numbers, I would ask staff that the recommendation for the amount of investment be maybe compared to what other communities are doing. And I know, Michelle, you sort of stated a state minimum. And that, I think that sort of information would be helpful to sort of look at in setting that investment down the road. But with that, I will recognize Commissioner Toles.
Mayor, one quick comment. I think that number is a little unrealistic, the $500,000. I think right now, last time I checked, there was 4 licenses available to purchase in the city of Mount Pleasant. I believe one was a resort and 3 other ones that I think they could be purchased for $50,000 or under. So $500,000, I think, is just way too high.
So I think that I don't know, Mary or Amy, if you had some comments. Amy, go ahead. Or Mary.
I would like to see it lowered. I think that $500,000 is just a little too high. But looking at other areas and finding out what they do would be important.
I can agree with that too.
Okay. So it looks like we've got some pretty clear direction on moving ahead with that. I believe so I know there was a little bit of confusion between me and George earlier. Like, I was looking at our agenda, and then if you look at the last page, it looks like there is the other item about continuing the marketing of downtown through past the TIFA plan. And
Mayor, I'll take responsibility for that. I didn't put that on your agenda because I felt like you had just approved that marketing plan right when the pandemic hit, and we really haven't done any of that marketing. And there was a lot of interest in seeing the results of it. So I felt like we need to see the results of what's already been approved before we start talking about anything in the future. So I didn't feel comfortable asking you that question tonight because I didn't think we had any better information for you.
okay. Thank you, Nancy. And that's something that until just now I haven't really thought about in much detail since we passed that $40,000 for them. And I can imagine the pandemic is complicating the efforts to utilize those funds and to also see the return on investment. So obviously that's probably a little bit of a longer discussion and some time needs to pass to probably more accurately assess that. It seems like at this point we've gone through everything that we need to talk about, and I just want to thank the commission for a good meeting. I'm sorry, Lori, and obviously staff. Thank you for all your help. Another great meeting tonight. And Nancy, just double check. Are you guys good to go?
I think we have what we need to move forward. We'll obviously be bringing you back a lot of stuff, but I think we have enough guidance for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And we stand adjourned at 10:13. Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Good evening, everybody.